Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. It Looked Back, written by Chinto. Ship's Lieutenant, First Class Talek, carefully shifted around the fire with what he considered a reasonable amount of caution. He was aware of what the fire was and what it could do, especially in such an uncontrolled situation as their recent ejection from a crashing interstellar spacecraft. Yet the humans of the surviving crew had rallied in a surprising manner, collecting the dead and injured, scavenging equipment and material from the downed ship, and then they hastily began erecting a series of emergency shelters that, while crude, had allowed the survivors to remain off the ground and out of the planet's changing weather patterns. And then they had set about starting a fire. A fire that was uncontrolled and entirely absent of any containment facilities, outside a small depression in the scraped dirt and a ring of rocks. It was madness in the extreme, but at the same time the humans had done many mad acts since the crash. Glancing over at the small white orb with a bloody handprint and a frond of local grass, Dalek shifted his feathers in resigned irritation before he continued to move around the fire towards the watch point. Again, it was another strange thing the humans had initiated, but made sense given the predators out and about on this hell world that they crashed on. Ahead of him, the current survivor on watch knelt down at the edge of the firelight, stared out into the midnight darkness, and made soft cooing and clicking noises.
"Crewman Third Class Taylor, what are you doing?"
he questioned, causing the man to look up with a mad light in his eyes. That look alone had all his feathers stand up in alarm. He had seen that very look several times before. The humans aboard the ship had done something stupid. Like the time that they had tried to leave the ship with nothing but a spacesuit with a long line of cord in an attempt to ride the ship through hyperspace. All the time that they had tried to link two ships into hyperspace drives together in sequence in an attempt to accelerate the ship to Plaid. The fact that they were not on board a ship and were in fact on a hell world after crashing had him concerned about what madness the human would do when unsupervised during his night shifts. Dalek was surprised when the crewman simply shushed him and turned back towards the darkness beyond the firelight and restored his soft, cooing noises. "I found a kitty," Taylor said in a soft whisper that seemed to fit between the cooing noises before tossing a small slice of cooked meat that they had foraged out into the darkness.
"A, kitty?"
Dalek queried, before a massive paw slightly larger than Dalek's chest wisped out of the darkness and snatched the silver liver of meat off the ground before it disappeared back into the shadows of night. Staring out into the darkness, Crewman Third Class Taylor smiled the same manic smile the humans were rapidly becoming known for as he sighed. "I'm gonna name you Snuffy, and you will be mine," he whispered into the darkness. Beyond the flickering light of the fire, the darkness stared back and began to purr. End of story. Story number 2. Fear Those Who Fear Death, written by Fox Corp. A human stands alone in a dark room, up to his knees in the blood of the fallen. In his hands, he holds a sword of red, blue, and green. Small chunks of alien flesh line the now down edge. His head, obscured by a dark visor, darts from side to side, scanning to see if anyone was left. In front of him, he hears a cry of pain that is quickly silenced by a swift jab of his sword. He heaves and wheezes, then promptly collapses to his knees. The room is suddenly filled with a blinding white light. A thunderous noise assaults the man's ears, and for many seconds the man is completely blinded and dazed. Now, unable to process his surroundings, the man is terrified. His eyes adjust, catching sight of thousands of vast glass panels overhead. Looking beyond the glass, he witnesses the largest planetary structure in the galaxy, the Grand Colosseum. He regains his composure and remembers where he is. It is here where thousands of the galaxy's most desperate come in search of fortune and fame. The human kneeling in the pit of carnage has just won. Through the land of his worst nightmares, he has arisen, victorious. His sword more swift, temper more unhinged, mind more brutal. The crowd had gone completely wild, shouting piercing the air like thunder as the crowd celebrated and cheered on their once unknown brute of a man, kneeling in the blood of his enemies. The man could only weep, his emotions overcoming the adrenaline, the scale of his slaughter fully realized by him. He stood and extended his arms. The blood began to drain, and the ground began to shake. The glass overhead began to retract. The platform he was on began to ascend towards the stands. As he got closer and closer, the crowd got louder and louder, until the sound of his applause muted even his own thoughts. The great marble and metal arches of the Colosseum glistened under the light of the planet's 3 stars. Faces filled with joy and bloodlust proudly reflected by the curved glass and metal streaking around them. He had done it. He had won. But how? The question sat in the air for what seemed like an eternity before Professor Ballon decided to finally elaborate.
This man was by no means the most strong species in the arena, nor was he the smartest. The question plagued scientists for decades before more study was done into this new species.
Puzzled and curious faces filled the room. Those who were capable leaned forward in their seats, each one eager to hear whatever miraculous answer would fill the mysterious void now overtaking their minds.
To understand them, we must first understand the average species of the galaxy, more specifically, their evolution and culture.
All eyes in the room focused on the professor, focusing on the outline of the biped in front of a gargantuan display. Chairs creaked and groaned as listeners strained closer to the professor's platform.
Most of the galactic species are nocturnal, less predators roam, and food is more easily obtained. Darkness is safety, and the light is dangerous. In human evolution, the night is seen as more dangerous. Their eyes aren't adjusted to living in such conditions, and predators roam freely in the dark. Thus, they associate death with the dark, not the light, as we do.
Puzzled looks darted across the room. One student even yelled out,
"What does that have to do with anything?" "Glad you asked. They evolved to avoid death more than they evolved to spread life. They are one of the only species in the galaxy to fear death."
Gasps and surprise filled the room.
As you know, most cultures saw death as a great innovator and shaper of progress. It was revered and loved by nearly every civilization that was vulnerable to it. Humanity, however, feared it to the point of insanity. Their brain is wired completely for self-preservation. In a violent situation, their rationality goes away, completely replaced by a primal fear of death. When the human fought against the aliens in that arena, he was aided by a brain hardwired to deal and thrive in such an environment.
The confusion in the room cleared, replaced by a deep intrigue.
"Tell us more." "Yes, of course. This was not the only reason. Fear of death alone didn't get that human through the fight. Its intelligence in combat helped out a lot as well. The human brain has evolved to cope with extreme situations. They have been known to survive and enjoy almost any experience other species would be mortified by. Human culture is geared towards violence, and they actually used to fight in colosseums just like the one of today, thousands of years ago."
The professor paused for a moment to take a long drink of water, then pausing to gather her composure once more, and promptly speaking again.
"To this day, violent sports and games are common amongst the human population. This man was training for fighting at the Colosseum since birth. He was biologically designed to come out on top. Remember, this is if you are to remember only one thing from today. If you ever question why, for the last 20 years, not a single human gladiator has lost to a non-human opponent, realize that they are hardwired to kill you, and will shut their morality down to do it in the most efficient way possible. I believe if any race is going to outlive and outshine the rest, my bet is on the humans."
End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I just want to give a quick thanks to the Tier 5 patrons and channel members. Alithia, Barky, Fudic Yol, Cam Maxwell, Casper Onholtz, White Band 420, Lord Asrakal, Arcalian, and Oakfield.